Hi guys, welcome to Alive, my search for the best ways to live. My name is Jiggy Jr., your host, and today we have an internist with subspecialty in clinical nutrition. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Karen Woolbright. Hi Karen.
Hi Jiggy, how are you?
I am awesome. How about you? How are you doing?
Never better.
From what I understand, you're um, being billeted somewhere out there as a COVID-19 volunteer. Maybe you can tell us more about what's going on with you right now.
Well, currently we're just making sure that the hospitals are not so congested. So we're taking care of the not so critical COVID, more as the stable COVID. So everybody, it's already, the quarantine rules are less, so be careful, everyone. You don't want to be in the hospitals or the isolation center, so take care.
We have been locked down for over almost 3 months now, and I think the restrictions have eased a little bit, right, Karen? But I think the virus is still out there, and I think we should still be cautious, right, Karen? I mean, we can't let our guard down, right?
That's right. Like many of the posts say, just because the restrictions have been eased doesn't mean the virus is gone. It's just that for the past 2 to 3 months, hopefully we have learned a lot on how to prevent getting the COVID by wearing masks, social distancing. I'm sure everybody's heard it over and over again. What we just need to do is practice it.
Kara, this is something, this pandemic has blindsided the world, right? Nobody knew what hit them, although there were warnings by, Bill Gates and other prominent doctors who warned us about a pandemic that was looming. But, this still blindsided the whole world. And I'm sure it blindsided you too, right, Karen? My question is, there's so many discoveries now that have propped up because we have been in this mess, this pandemic for the past 3 months or a little bit longer than that, and have been on lockdown for over 2 months, almost 3 months. There have been several discoveries, and there's a huge body of data now because there are millions out there who have been affected. There was a study about a few weeks ago that found out that people in Indonesia, the Philippines, and in the United States, in New Orleans, they found out that patients with vitamin D deficiency have a higher rate of mortality and severity as well of COVID-19 compared to those that have a correct amount of vitamin D in their system. Their symptoms were lesser, if you will. So can you speak to that, Karen? Is that true? Is vitamin D a huge component to whether you will survive COVID-19 or not?
That's true, Jiggy. There are a lot of studies coming out, new studies from different countries. And one of them is vitamin D. Now, when you talk about vitamins, it means actually a nutrient that is necessary for life, but has to be taken because you don't make it your own. You don't make it on your own, I'm sorry. So that means vitamin D is actually not a nutrient per se, because we can actually produce vitamin D when you expose yourself to the sun. But for sure, these countries like the US, some European countries where there's winter, they have lower, when it's winter, they have lower levels of vitamin D, so they're very prone to vitamin D deficiencies. Other people who are prone to vitamin D deficiencies are also people who are bedridden, who don't go out as much. So it's been proven not only for COVID that you can get severe disease and have decreased lifespan when you have low vitamin D levels. It's not surprising that it's actually the same for COVID. However, just a small amount of sun exposure every day, like 15 to 30 minutes every day, is actually enough to stop any vitamin D deficiency. Of course, there are some people who work at night and don't have exposure to sunlight. They do need to supplement. Or you have some people who are bedridden where you can't bring the bed outside every day. You still need to supplement. So vitamin D is necessary, but of course, since I don't consider it as a pure vitamin, you still need to consult with your physician regarding vitamin D. It's not similar to a C or a B where you just, if you take it, it's over the counter and it's fine. For vitamin D, there are some things you need to consider before taking.
Since it's a vitamin that you can get from exposure to the sun, I remember my folks would tell me to go out, out there early in the morning. Is there a specific time that you should get your exposure to the sun? That 15 minutes that you were looking for, that you were saying, is that a specific time of the day or any time of the day, as long as you have 15 minutes exposure?
Actually, it's not really important what time of the day, as long as it's a direct sunlight.
Okay.
Actually, even indoors, you will still get a very little amount of the of sunlight. It's just not very visible to the eyes. But direct, it's what we need is the direct sunlight rather than just being in a shade. Being in direct sunlight, although they always say that the sun is not good for your skin, a little would be healthy. So it's a balance.
From what I understand, your rate of absorption depends on the color of your skin, right? And
Yes,
white, Americans, white people tend to absorb it differently compared to, let's say, African Americans and Filipinos.
yes.
Based on our skin profile, is the Filipino skin conducive to the right absorption of that vitamin D that we're looking for from the sun?
The beauty of the skin of the Filipino, our skin, I'm so proud of being Filipino, is we're in between.
Okay.
So we're not too dark and too light. So we have the appropriate amount of melanin to produce enough vitamin D.
So 15 minutes is the number of minutes for a Filipino.
Yes, 15 to 30 minutes. So that would be sufficient. 15 to 30 minutes every day. Imagine some people who have vitamin D deficiency and who are really deficient, wherein they have not seen the sun for months at a time. Just a few days of 15 to 30 minutes have shown that they already increased their levels to normal values. So it's not very difficult to get the vitamin D, especially here in the Philippines, where we have summer all year long.
How do you test for vitamin D? Is it in your blood? Can you get a blood test for vitamin D?
Yes, there is a blood test. It's like you just have a small prick. They get a few ml of blood, and the next day you get the results. Although the vitamin D determination is not present in all laboratories. Sometimes they need to send it to Manila, but I think we have a few laboratories here that can test for vitamin D.
Okay, so the supplements, in case you don't go out as much as you would want to, or maybe like you said, you work at night and you're never exposed to the sun, there are supplements. Do you need a prescription for a vitamin D supplement, or you can just get it straight from the counter?
Because the vitamin D is labeled as a vitamin rather than a hormone, vitamin D is actually over the counter. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't have a lot of toxic effects, but if you have problems with your kidney or your liver, you must seek first the advice of a physician, because you could overdose with vitamin D, although it's very rare to overdose because of the amounts that are sold in the pharmacy. But a very good dose would be 400 international units once a day is enough. You don't have to go to the mega doses of vitamin D. unless, of course, it's proven that you do have a deficiency by a blood test.
You know, the body of evidence for vitamin D is huge. Like I said, it was a study that was conducted in Indonesia, here in the Philippines, and in New Orleans in the United States. And you mentioned there was also a study in Ireland. Is the body of knowledge enough? Is a study enough for us to conclude that there is a correlation between vitamin D and the severity of COVID-19? Is that enough to make that conclusion, or we still need more studies, Karen?
So the severity of COVID-19 does not rely alone on vitamin D levels. You have to consider other factors, other risk factors present in each patient. Other patients could have normal vitamin Ds but uncontrolled glucose due to diabetes or cardiovascular disease or a problem with clotting in their blood. So there are so many factors to consider. Each person has a different genetic structure, a different background. So you can't really just say it's just vitamin D. It's really multifactorial. But definitely having enough vitamin D based on the studies will decrease your risk of being a critical COVID patient. But see, you have to remember, it says decrease the risk. So that means there will still be some outliers with normal vitamin D levels, and yet they will still get severe COVID. So it's really, you add up the risks, you add up the health benefits. So you have to, it's not mathematics and science. 1 + 1 doesn't add up to 2.
But it's safe to say that you can do what your grandma told you and get out there and get some exposure to the sun, right?
Yes, that is true.
Another thing that also is getting a lot of traction here in Cebu, especially, Doc, is the thing called TUOB. People are saying that it is a preventative process for COVID-19. Some are even saying that it could probably help turn things around. And I hate to say this, but they think it also cures them of COVID-19. Can you speak to that, Doc? Because this is getting a lot of attention here in Cebu, but only here in Cebu. Other parts of the world aren't following suit. So I'm wondering if there's any truth to this, or this is just pseudoscience.
So COVID-19 presents most of the time with respiratory symptoms such as cough, dry throat, colds, and sore throat. And so the easiest way to resolve that symptomatically is usually gargling, steam inhalation. And so that's why TUOB, which is actually steam inhalation, is very common. It's very popular because it relieves the symptoms. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be cured of the COVID infection. Now, the COVID infection is in the bloodstream and it attaches to your lungs, but TUOB just targets the mucous membranes. It's just through the air. Air doesn't go to your blood. So it is absorbed by the lungs, but the TUOB itself doesn't, the hot air, a hot steam, doesn't really go to your bloodstream. And if it does, it doesn't kill the virus there. So yes, TUOB can be symptomatic relief. It's also part of our culture. We always have palinang, paaso. It's not bad. But if you think that it can cure you, you may get a false sense of security and do TUOB even if you're COVID positive and go out thinking you're cured. And it might be dangerous that way. So you have to understand that if you want to do it, no one is going to stop you from doing it. There is no cure for COVID-19 right now. But don't think that you are cured from it.
Are there any risks in performing TUOB or steam inhalation? Aside from
Well,
those,
steam inhalation is, pardon?
aside from the one that you mentioned, that you get
I beg your pardon.
overconfident and then you go out there, you think you're cured already. That's a risk, right? Not for you personally, but for those that are
Yes.
around you. What are the other risks for TUOB?
Definitely, you can get scalding burns if you're not careful. You can even get respiratory burns if the steam is too hot. They have photos and instructions of being under a blanket, being there for an unlimited amount of time. You can have, and you're on the floor, the water can spill. So you have to be careful with these things. Sometimes, you think you're doing something right, and then you end up in the hospital because of something that you're doing that's not really safe. So you can do a little bowl, not so hot water. It will still steam.
How about the introduction of moisture into your lungs? Is that part of the risks of doing TUOB?
Not so much, as long as you don't have any other problems with your lungs. Technically, moisture, steam in your lungs is not really a problem. It's more of the heat that you introduce. If it's too hot, if it's steaming, and it could cause burns. In the hospital, we do nebulization, which is actually
TUOB, right?
fluid.
In a way.
Yes, it's TUOB, although it is not hot. It's more of a cold type of TUOB, because we don't want to cause incidental burns, incidental scalding burns. So the nebulization is some degree. Sometimes we just put plain, normal saline inside these things just to be able to relieve you of the dryness in your throat or the congestion from sputum in your lungs. But it doesn't cure the infection. If it's bacterial or viral, it's just symptomatic.
Is the world already actually doing their own version of TUOB already for COVID-19 patients, but only it's called something else, to cure the patient of the soreness, the nasal problems, the symptoms of
Congestion, yes.
congestion. Yeah, are hospitals doing that anyway already?
The difference with the COVID infection is that it actually has a high risk of transmission through the mouth when you're breathing fast, when you're having difficulty breathing. And so the nebulization, which is a very common treatment or symptomatic treatment that we give for patients with respiratory illness, is not so commonly done for COVID patients because of the risk that while they are being given the nebulization, more of the viral particles will spread inside the room.
Okay. So they're not doing that in hospitals around the world?
They're not doing it so common, unless, of course, unless the patient is already intubated, then the nebulization will be attached to the mechanical ventilator.
Wow. Okay. Still with COVID-19, but in a totally different light. The reason why we have this pandemic is, aside from our population explosion, it is also our relationship with animals, with food, right? And they're saying that this virus came from a bat, and for some odd reasons, the bat got in contact perhaps with another animal and got in contact with a human being. And they're saying if we were all just vegans, this would not have happened. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on our relationship with food as a species, Karen? How do you feel about that statement? About if we were just all vegans, this would not have happened.
Well, as a nutrition physician,
okay,
I'm exposed to a lot of different kinds of food choices that people have. Sometimes food restrictions because of disease. But you have to understand that there is no perfect food. sometimes the vegans, they like to say it's the one for me. It's the only perfect food, but that is a personal choice. That is an opinion. We have had hundreds of years, hundreds and thousands of years. Each country have different cultural foods, cultural way of eating. We eat rice. If you give rice to someone from, let's say, France every day, they would be disgusted, But if you give a Filipino bread every day, they'd say that you're starving them. So food actually is different in every culture. So if you accept that there is a variety of ways to be healthy using different local foods, then you can understand that you can't really prevent something like this from happening. It's technically impossible to let everyone be vegan and just not allow and not have like a zoonotic virus to accidentally get into our race. But you have to also consider that there was really no proof that the coronavirus came from a bat, came from a pangolin, was transmitted from animal to animal. The reason why they surmise this is because of the genetic composition of the virus itself, which was similar to some form of virus that infected bats. And so they never found the bat. They never traced it. It was all an assumption based on the genetic composition. So we have had so many zoonotic diseases in the past, up to AIDS, up to Ebola. These viruses have been thought to start from non-human sources and then evolved and then infected humans. And for Ebola and for HIV, they were not from food sources. So it is possible for a virus or a bacteria to jump from one species to another. It takes time, but mutations happen. So this is just one of those. I think food sources should not be blamed for that.
Well, they're saying that it was this exotic food market in Wuhan that sold exotic food, like animals, right? That enabled the transfer from animal to humans. So you don't think that our relationship with food, especially with nature, with animals, is going haywire? We have crossed the line. You don't think there's something wrong with our relationship with food as a species? You don't think so?
Actually, on the contrary, I think and I see that people nowadays are becoming more aware of healthier food choices. They see in the past 2 or 3 decades, they saw the effect that a poor nutrition can do to the body. And more people are becoming healthier by choosing food sources, by being more physically active. And I think although we are seeing a lot of these because a lot of healthier choices because of our mistakes in the past, I think I don't believe that we do have an unhealthy relationship with food. I think it's just a choice. It depends on the person, and it's your mental and spiritual openness. Some people would, yeah. So
I think our problem with food now is overabundance, right? Instead of lack of it. In fact, I think obesity is such a
true. It is
problem.
that is so true, and because of that problem that has happened in the past 3 decades, more and more are now shifting to eating healthier because they now see that overabundance of food actually will cost them in the future. So, but I think we're rather than that we're eating more exotic. I think those types of those people who eat exotic are like a minority now.
Mhm.
Imagine we only eat less than 5% of possible food sources in the world.
Wow.
We have already lost our indigenous fruits and vegetables, which were very commonplace centuries ago. Why? Because there's now always a trend towards the same kinds of food. We all eat potatoes, rice, pasta. You know, we don't anymore eat those different indigenous crops that we used to have before. So we're actually losing all those food types that we used to eat before.
Because they're no longer being farmed or they're no longer available, right?
Yes, because it's not the trend.
Mhm.
So the trend is delicious. It's presented well. So those are now what's selling. And so if you have a local food that used to be the food source of our ancestors and which made them healthy before, it's not available now. We probably don't even know it if we see it.
So is there a way for us to get back to that?
I think it's
You notice a weird sound? There's a weird sound I can hear. I think I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so do you think we can get back to that, Karen? Do you think what do you call that? Eating the same food that our ancestors ate? Like I don't know. Media is such a powerful force in a nation's psyche that we are all influenced by these trends all over the world, right? It's kind of difficult to turn things around and encourage people to just eat whatever is there in their backyard, so to speak, right?
yes. Actually, it's more of a movement that is also. I'm very cultural. I love the Philippines,
Mhm.
and I always search for dishes that were very commonplace before, cooked in the ways we used to cook before. Like we used to have clay pots. We hardly had metal pans
Mhm.
when before the Spanish arrived, pre-colonial era. And although those people pre-colonial had a higher risk of diabetes already, diabetes was not very commonplace even during the Spanish time, and it was because of the food choices. So I think right now there is an increase, 20% per year increase in the risk of in the incidence of diabetes,
In the
up
Philippines,
to
or
yes, here in the Philippines alone. And for children, there's a 200% increase in diabetes in children. That's very high, meaning that the the number of diabetics are spiking, and you have to understand that COVID actually has a higher risk of severity for patients who are diabetic.
correct.
So
Why do you think that's
it's,
happening? Why do you think that
pardon?
more people are getting diabetic in these times here in the Philippines? Is that because of our bad diet here in the Philippines?
It's more of overabundance of food and convenience. It's so convenient to just get food anywhere, and we eat more often than we should and exercise less than we should, and we move less than we should. So this is a bad combination, and eventually your body becoming diabetic, type 2 diabetes, is actually a sign that you have not been taking care of it so well for a long time. Because you don't get diabetic by eating a buffet one night. It's having dessert, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 10 years. You know, that's how you get diabetic. And it's so convenient to get refined carbohydrates now. And so we get diabetes earlier, and diabetes is more of the destruction of your pancreas. And so your body breaks down. And so when you get diseases like COVID, your body is already weak. Then these people have more severe COVID. But it's not just COVID. See, even before COVID, diabetics have a higher risk for infections, for pneumonia, for problems, for amputations, for stroke, for cardiovascular.
Is diabetes one of the top killers here in the Philippines?
The top killer is still cardiovascular disease or heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, problems with the blood in the heart. So that's still the number one. But most of these patients also have diabetes. And diabetes numbers are spiking very, very fast.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book, The Blue Zone, Kathy. You're familiar, Karen? Are you familiar with that, The Blue Zone?
I'm sorry. Who is the author?
It was a book that sort of located the healthiest countries in the world, in fact, based on the centenarians that lived in those countries. And I think the Philippines wasn't there. I think the nations that were included in the so-called blue zone were places like Japan, and I think there were certain parts of Europe, you know, that stuff. Based on our racial profile, based on our our being Filipino, what do you think can contribute to an optimal diet? Because I know you mentioned earlier before we took this video, or we're taking this video, that there's no one size fits all optimal diet, right? But based on what we know as a general rule of a Filipino, what do you think can contribute to helping us living longer and healthier lives?
It's nice that you mentioned about the Japanese, because in Japan, they do have a law that would tax you if you have a certain waistline over the limit.
Wow.
Or weight over the limit. So you have to analyze why did this happen? You know, why did the government do this? A lot of people, without thinking, would say, that is unfair. How can you judge somebody based on their weight? But that's not the point. The point is that they have found evidence and studies that if you are of a certain weight or have a waistline that is beyond a certain size, that eventually in your lifespan, you will have more diseases, more hospitalizations, and more risk for cost to the healthcare system. So that means if you don't take care of your health, you will pay for it eventually. But in Japan, they don't pay for healthcare. It is given by the government. And so if you don't take care of your health, the government pays for that. Yeah. You're asking somebody else to pay for your
hospitalization,
yeah, your hospitalization. So Japan knows that. So Japan just says, okay, you're heavier, you have a bigger waistline, so we know you're going to be spending so much time in the hospital later. We don't want to stand for that. For pay for it now. Like it's obesity is, like being fat is bad. It's not about that, because you can be big but muscular. You can be bigger but healthier as well. And that's why Japan has determined that for their size, for their Asian their frame.
So is
And
that
so
across the board? Is that all the entire Japan, or just a certain area of Japan that has that law? Is that a law?
it's a whole country of
Oh,
Japan.
interesting. So my question is,
we have exceptions.
what do you think is the optimal diet for us, the Filipino profile that will help us live longer and healthier lives? Can you tell us what to eat tomorrow?
So it's
Hold on, I think you're cutting out. Hold on.
different sizes.
Okay.
Some people are 6 foot tall, some are 4'11".
Okay.
And 1 cup of rice is not the median for all.
Okay.
You know, it seems like everybody gets 1 cup of rice.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, you're a guy, you get 2, and you're a girl, you get 1. But it really depends on what you do, how tall you are, how much energy you're willing to spend. So if you eat a buffet, expect to exercise that. So when you say, what do we need to eat? You just need to eat mostly low-fat food, mostly low-salt food, high in fiber, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables in the quantity that your body requires. Because if you are weightlifting and you have like you're muscular and you weightlift like 3 hours a day, you'll probably need 10 times more food than I eat. So you just have to choose and moderate all the intake that you have. You can't say ice cream is bad. No, ice cream is scoop. But if you take 5 scoops 3 times a day, that's a big difference from enjoying a little ice cream. So what do we need to eat? You can eat what you want in moderation. Just make sure you have a lot of healthy sources, fruits and vegetables. Is that a Coke?
But it's a Coke Zero.
But exactly. See, there is nothing wrong with having to drink a Coke.
Mm-hmm.
But if you drink a Coke 5-10 times a day and you don't take your regular fruits and vegetables, then there's something, you expect something to happen. Mm-hmm. Although there are still outliers, like I said, some people can get away with it. No, but it's a matter of statistics. So you don't live your life based on one person. So it's more of a general.
You don't want to be a statistic.
No. You don't want to be that special case. That's
So I think what you're trying to say here, the optimal diet for a Filipino, I think what you're saying is it's really about volume control, right? Based on your size, and you just have to take everything in moderation. Is that what you're saying, Doctor?
Yes. That's what I'm saying is depending on your choices, your food preferences, your risk. Example, if you have a genetic risk, both your parents are diabetic and you know you have that higher risk than the regular person, then you should limit. So there's no one size fits all for a healthy diet. But you just have to...
Everything in moderation would be something that's easy to remember, and would probably be a correct statement to everyone here watching this video, right?
Yes.
You mentioned fruits and vegetables earlier. There's such constant debate about what happens to a fruit, for example, or a vegetable if you squeeze it out of the fruit and drink the liquid from the fruit, as opposed to eating it, because something happens to the food when you squeeze it out of its shell. So can you speak to that? I mean, is there truth to that it's really better to eat a fruit than to drink it?
Well, the problem with nutrition is that you can't have a randomized clinical trial where you have 100 people who just eat all squeezed fruits and vegetables, and another 100 people who eat fruits and vegetables whole, and let them do this for like 5 years and see what happens to the first 100 and the second 100. It's not ethical to do that. And so there are really no studies to prove that it's better or not to drink just squeezed fruit juice or the whole fruit on its own. But definitely fruits and vegetables as a food source is better than processed food. Have been on the shelf for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there are a lot of diseases that prevent you once you are sick. Sometimes fruits and vegetables become toxic to you. So that's why you can't really say squeezed fruits are the best. You know, a person who is completely healthy with no diabetes, no problems cardiovascularly, and they have this diet just of fruit juice for years, they don't find any, they don't get toxicities, or they're healthy. But if you get a renal patient who wants to cure their kidneys and then shifts to a fruit juice diet, it will become toxic to them. They will actually die of hyperkalemia. So you have to, it's not one size fits all. You have to know who can take it, why they're taking it, how much, how long.
We've heard that statement, let food be thy medicine. I think it was, who said that? Socrates, right? Or I forgot who said that, but
Yeah, Hippocrates.
Hippocrates, yeah, he said that. Let food be thy medicine. Does food actually help cure certain diseases?
So it's funny that that statement by Hippocrates, which is the father of medicine,
Yeah.
is repetitively posted everywhere, like it's a law.
Yeah.
Now, you have to first dissect the saying. It has no basis. There's no statistical analysis based on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just a saying, and it's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Now, food is not medicine, and medicine is not food by definition. But for sure, if you have a very good eating habit and you maintain your weight, you stay healthy and active, you decrease exposures to toxic food, then you will probably not get to a point where you will, but you will not get to a disease state early. And so you will need medicines later.
So
Now,
I guess it prevents you from, if you eat well, then it prevents you from getting
yes.
sick, right? I think that's what that statement means. But are there
Yes.
actual food items, fruits or vegetables or herbs that can help cure you, that can act as medicine? Is that a correct statement?
Well, fruits and vegetables contain a lot of chemicals. And most of our pharmaceutical medicines actually evolved from herbs that showed specific actions toward the body. And when they found that this herb produces a certain effect, they would research in the laboratory which chemical inside this herb produces that, extract it, and put it in a capsule or a tablet, and that's what you give. That's what you take. So in essence, you can say that some of our medications came from food. But medicine is targeted therapy, meaning you have a disease and you take it to stop that disease. Food, on the other hand, is more of sustenance. You need it every day, whether or not you're sick. And you need it at a certain quantity, which is more than what medicine will need. A medicine is small, it's a tablet.
Mm-hmm.
But food is a larger dose, and food will support you with nutrients to help you heal, but it is not the medicine. That's why we always consider ourselves, our groups, as nutrition support rather than food is medicine.
I think a lot of people, maybe not the majority of people, but I think a lot of people are suspicious about the, pharmaceutical industry, because these are such a huge money-making machines, right? And so every time there's a cure that is natural, is from herbs or from certain fruits, um, they're saying that they're being criticized because the pharmaceutical industry is scared of this particular natural cure, and they'll run out of business or something like that. What is the relationship now? How do you feel about the pharmaceutical industry and the traditional medicine, like the Chinese traditional medicine, the traditional Filipino medicine, like for example the one that I mentioned, TUOB. Do you side with one more than the other? Do you think that traditional Chinese medicine, for example, or traditional Filipino medicine is just pseudoscience, and the pharmaceutical industry is and these medicines that have been studied for such a long time should be the one that everyone should be taking? How do you feel about those two things, Karen?
Well, a lot of our pharmaceutical medicines actually evolve from those alternative medications, those Chinese medications. And like I said, after seeing a certain predisposition for these herbs and plants and vegetables to cause certain reactions in the body, the pharmaceutical industries spent money to extract these chemicals. And once they found them, they would use them in certain concentrations to produce certain curative effects. So when there are these tablets or herbals that they take, if it's fresh, I don't mind. I don't mind them taking the fresh herbs, but it's unfair to say that the pharmaceutical industry is getting a lot of money from sick patients, when in fact these herbal medications that say nito dapat gamitin, nito dapat gamitin, you know how fast that is? That was like 1 second.
Yeah.
This is a billion peso industry.
I can imagine.
It's also unfair. It's also unfair to say, the pharmaceutical industry is getting money. So is the herbal industry.
Yeah.
And the herbal industry
the wellness
is not
industry,
required.
they call it, right? The wellness industry.
The wellness industry, yes. And they're not required to submit randomized clinical trials.
Yeah.
So I'm really open to any form of therapy that can help my patients, but I would want to see some proof. We can start trials, we can test it, but just leaving it in the dark and saying that, my diabetes is gone because I took it, it's kind of unfair and it's very misleading. So I'm not very much a fan of the herbal supplements, but I'm not against them. I don't actually tell my patients not to take them. I just tell them, just be careful and be honest with me, because we do have some patients who are normal, healthy individuals who have severe reactions to these herbal medications. And because the FDA does not require tests on these, so we can't also pinpoint. So that's why I'm just waiting for studies. When I see the studies, when I see evidence, then I believe. If I don't see evidence, I'm skeptic. So that's why I guess I lean towards more to the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
Although I don't say no to the herbal industry.
Okay. Karen, with this pandemic, I have been a witness to a lot of grocery shopping, right? And I've seen what people have been buying, and I see that their choices are just horrendous. You know, they're buying junk food and this and that, I think I'm guilty of that too as well. Um, uh,
Yes.
how do you think? How do you think? Because I know one of your advocacies you mentioned earlier before we when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that you'd like to have to make the Philippines healthy. Um, how do you think we can legislate or convince the Filipino to make the right choices when it comes to food? Because I think our choices, based on what I witnessed in the groceries, is just horrendous. How do you
It's
think?
true. It's
How can we do this, Karen?
I don't think it's legislation that will solve this problem.
Okay.
I think it's education.
Okay.
I think it's showing the Filipino people that utan is not para sa pobre.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we have children who have lunch boxes with vegetables come crying home because they were teased.
Mm-hmm.
So we have in in my practice in Manila, I would see children. If I ask them if they eat vegetables, they would say, "No way!" You know, like, okay. So we are not educating enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a lot of countries that have very good um, lifespan, like in France and in Japan, they always eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and they eat a lot also of their native cultural foods. So these food items have been with them for a long time, and so Japanese food, French food, they've been eating their delicacies. So you know that their genetics, their bodies are used to that. And I think we're eating Western foods and we're Filipinos. We are not used to metabolizing that. So I think we should focus on a lot of the foods that we usually eat, like saba and kamote and gabi, you know, and our local foods. We should focus, go back to that. But legislating it is, I think, not going to work
You mentioned Japan.
because no, it's not. I don't think our government has prioritized that.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
difficult to. I think our priorities right now are economics and infrastructure. We believe we're so industrialized, and so we forget that, you know, we forget the basics of nutrition. So I think the best way to teach the Filipinos to be healthy is to convince them, to let them know that it's for them, that no amount of law, no law will force them to be healthy. It's up to them. And I think that's why I'm going to um, be more alert on, not alert, be more, what do you call this? Present. Be more present online for free educationals on nutrition to help the Filipinos know that it's really a good investment to be healthy, because PhilHealth is not going to pay for that. PhilHealth has a very small compensation, and so we have to take care of our health, and we have to use the money that we're supposed to spend on our disease for us, you know, to enjoy life rather than to sell the land because we got sick.
There's another question that came up earlier that I'd like to ask you about, since you're an internist with a clinical nutrition specialty, about intermittent fasting. Everybody's talking about intermittent fasting. Before this coronavirus, everybody was doing IF. Is IF, intermittent fasting, a good way to lose weight, doctor?
Actually, intermittent fasting is not new. Um, Eating 3 times a day is not really the norm for the whole world. Some cultures eat once a day, some cultures eat twice a day, some cultures eat every other day. So intermittent fasting has been there for a long time. Even Muslims, they do intermittent fasting during the Ramadan. That is considered intermittent fasting. They don't eat all day and then they just eat at night. So it's been there, and there have been studies not on humans but on animals that have shown that withholding feeding for certain animals actually extends their lifespan. They don't know if it's because of the effect due to not being able to gain weight, or just some hormonal or metabolic process because of the fasting. But intermittent fasting can be done, but it has to be done correctly and for the right reasons. Now, if your weight is normal and you do intermittent fasting and then you have anorexic tendencies, then it's not really intermittent fasting, it's psychologic, psychiatric already. And some diseases like diabetes and some metabolic diseases actually don't allow intermittent fasting. People with cirrhosis cannot tolerate it. So you have to also understand your body before you to do it properly. You have to get the help of a dietitian. The dietitians will be able to help you with intermittent fasting to progress the length of fasting. We actually have guidelines from our local doctors that accept intermittent fasting for weight loss. Now, for weight loss, it's okay, and you have to do it properly as
Um, we talked about obesity earlier, and I want to ask you this again about obesity. Do we have a weight problem here in the Philippines?
Yes, we do have a weight problem. It's increasing every year, and our numbers are staggering. But the problem with the Filipino race is that our numbers to determine if we're obese or overweight is actually lower than that of the whites. So if you're a white person or if you're a Caucasian, you need a BMI or a basal body mass index of 25 to be considered overweight. But for a Filipino, you only need 22.5 to be considered overweight. Now, these numbers are not just numbers that were made and determined, let's make it at 25, no? These were not discovered that way. How were BMI or body mass index discovered? So what they do is they get a lot of people, they check the weight of these people, the height of these people, they check the BMI. Then they check which BMI has a lot of diseases. And that number starts at 25, meaning once you hit 25 BMI, the curve goes up. Your risk for all these diseases, cardiovascular, diabetes, stroke, they increase. And so we don't want you to be in that group. We want you to be in the lower group where there's less risk of these.
When you say BMI, explain to us what does BMI mean? Because it's not just about weight, right? It's also about other factors. So when you say BMI, what is the computation for your BMI?
So BMI is a ratio of your height versus your weight versus your height squared. So if you're shorter, you need to weigh less because otherwise you'll be too heavy. But if you're very tall, you also have to weigh more. So
So it's
that
just
is
height and weight.
height and weight.
Okay,
Yes.
I thought there were other factors for BMI. So it's really just your weight, right? Based on your height, your build.
Yes. But
So
that's gonna be a this is gonna be a long discussion about BMI, because BMI is like an initial vital sign. Because you have a high BMI also does not mean that you're fat,
okay,
because your weight could also be muscular,
okay,
and you could be obese by BMI, but
Mhm.
you have like only 10% fat.
Mhm.
Like for instance, John Cena and
Mm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger during my time, they're obese class 2 or 3.
Okay,
They're
based on
classified
BMI.
based on BMI,
Mm.
but they're not fat.
Mhm.
They're just so heavy because of their muscle weight.
Mhm.
So you can't classify them in the same category as an obese who's bedridden because he's got too much fat.
So Arnold Schwarzenegger obviously looks healthy. John Cena looks healthy. So they're obese based on their weight, but they don't have the risk factors of an obese person.
Exactly. So BMI is a very good screening tool,
Okay.
meaning you use it because it's fast, it's easy.
Mhm.
You don't need any special equipment. It's like taking a pulse. Somebody is unconscious, you take the pulse. You know if he's alive or dead, but maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but you don't have any equipment at that time. So it's just an assessment. So the BMI, you check, you look, he looks good, he doesn't look good. That's all. It doesn't say anything else unless you have further tests, body composition, blood works, physical activity, functional capacity. That's the only time you really know if a person is as healthy as he should be.
We have a lot of viewers who are probably thinking of trying to change their eating habits watching this interview right now. Karen, what is your advice to them? What's the first step that they should take for them to become healthier and to make the right choices? Because, like you said, it's so tempting when you go to the aisle of a mall. Pick me, and it's so easy to drive through. It's so easy to make a phone call and have something delivered to you. It is daunting to say no to all of these temptations food wise. So what's your advice for those who would like to shift gear and eat healthy?
My advice is to not do it overnight. So sometimes we're eating junk foods, sugary drinks in a buffet, and then we're just disgusted with ourselves and we say, tomorrow I'm gonna be vegetarian. It doesn't work like that. So food is social, food is cultural, food is emotional. If you take away all these things that are part of you, you will undergo depression and you will fail. You have to take it one step at a time. You take one food group, you decrease it, you lessen it. You don't take it out entirely. If you drink like Coke 3 times a day, maybe for a week or two, make it twice a day. Once or twice you'll fail. Maybe you won't be able to do it. But maybe in a month, it'll be, instead of 3 times, it'll be 2 times. So you do it that way, slowly, and introduce options. You don't take away without replacing, because there's that empty spot now. So you replace it with something that is healthier, a healthier option. And eventually you will get used to it. And once it's a habit, it's a lifestyle. It's not a medication that you take like a pill. You have to decide. And when you remove something, that's part of you. It's part of what makes you happy, it's very difficult. So you have to do it slowly. Okay,
Do you,
that's my advice.
do you need to maybe talk to somebody? You know, if there's a psychiatrist for those who have mental problems, or do you can you seek your help, doctor? Is a nutritionist nutritionist the right person to ask when it comes to changing your diet?
Actually, the Philippines have a lot of dietitians, and they're undertapped. They're very very good with giving you food choices, and that's their specialty. So you don't if it's just losing weight or changing your diet, you can actually talk to a lot of dietitians. It's not very common to go to a dietitian, and that's probably why they're difficult to find. They're mostly in the hospitals right now or in cancer centers, but dietitians are very very handy. You should you should consult them regularly. For a dietitian to work, you have to make a connection, and you have to go back and almost like a psychologist, psychiatrist. You will only need a psychiatrist if you really have a problem with food, like anorexia, or if the dietitian doesn't help you. So then she will probably refer you to a psychiatrist.
I was going to leave it at that, Karen, but I think there's one more question that I'd be remiss if I don't ask you. You know, we've already started easing down the lockdown, right? The restrictions, I mean, and you know, the country is slowly opening up. You know, and you know, you see crowds now in the malls, in the groceries and all that stuff, in certain public places. And I think it is, you know, like what I've been saying in previous interviews, this pandemic is not a restart button. It is an accelerant of things that you're supposed to be doing in the first place. And one of the things that we are supposed to be doing is to have a healthy lifestyle, to become you know, more immune to all these diseases that will be coming our way, because it's so expensive to get sick. We're supposed to be doing that, but right now, because of this pandemic, we're forced to accelerate the process of living a healthy lifestyle. Uh, uh, Karen, can you give us a? I know that we talked about vitamin D in the beginning and how, you know, vitamin D can help you with COVID-19.
Sorry, you got cut.
Um, can you hear me right now, Karen? Can you hear me?
Sorry, you got cut, Jiggy.
But are we back? Can you hear me now?